What's going on, everybody, and welcome to this week's Bourbon of the Week. We have Remus Repeal Reserve. This is the newest batch 5 that just got released. And let me tell you what, I never knew what tired was. I never knew what tired was until I had a new baby girl, and I am tired, so we are sitting down tonight. But that's okay. Remus Repeal, batch number 5, act number 5, scene number 5, whatever it is. This is number 5. Everybody knows before we get started, time for the traditional sip. Pretty good. So we're going to be laid back tonight here, ladies and gentlemen. This is Remus Repeal. Is it batch? Is it batch number 5? I don't even know. It doesn't say on here. I'm going to call it batch number 5. Remus Repeal 5. That's what it is. And I did have to print this out because listen to these. This is the mash bill. 9% of a 2005 bourbon with 21% rye. 5% of a 2006 bourbon with 36% rye, 19% of a 2006 bourbon with 21% rye, 13% of a 2008 bourbon with 21% rye, and 54% of a 2008 bourbon with 36% rye. So this is a bunch of bourbons put together. Oh, it says it right here on the... I'm an idiot. So this is a whole bunch of high rye bourbon, which is absolutely fantastic for my palate. Love that. This also comes in at 100 proof, although it's not a bottled and bond. So it isn't bottled and bond technically, but it's a 100 proof bourbon. But that's what we're working with here. This comes from Luxco, which was just recently acquired from by MGP. So this is the first year that Luxco is running it under MGP. But it is MGP juice. All of it is MGP juice. So... does that make a difference between this batch and the previous batches? I have no idea. I haven't tried any of the other batches. But this is apparently some of the oldest MGP juice to come out of MGP. And some of the best at this rye proof and everything. So this is apparently the best of the best when it comes to MGP. So we've really got to put it to the test here. MGP obviously sources bourbon for... anybody who's sourcing bourbon is probably using MGP. Now that's not completely true. I know Bardstown does a lot of sourcing themselves. But MGP is the number one place that most people go when they source bourbon. Penelope, a great favorite of mine, sources from MGP. A lot of products come from MGP. Just Google MGP products. You'll see who they take care of. But that's what we're working with here. A non-age stated, very high rye, lots of different bourbon mash bill coming from Luxco/MGP. And we said non-age stated. Right. So let's just get into this. Let's not keep you. Price, taste, drinkability, our Bourbon Bomb of the Week. We're going to talk about... it's actually a crazy story, so make sure you stick around for the Remus Repeal, or the Remus story. This guy had a crazy life, and they actually think they made the Great Gatsby book after him. That's how crazy this guy's life was. So stick around for that, because it has a few twists and turns. It's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. But make sure you click that subscribe button down below. We are working our way on to 1,500 subscribers already. I know we just hit 1,000. We're going to do our 1,000 sub giveaway live soon, I promise. Just a lot of transitioning going on right now in my life, so let's get through that, and then we'll get to the lives for you eventually. Drinkability is where we're going to start on this. 100 proof, and while the taste on this is definitely fantastic, starting with drinkability, it does have a bit of a kick. For a 100 proof bourbon, I do think it has a little bit of a bite to it that I wasn't really expecting. I expected this to be straight smooth, and it's not over dramatic. It's not anything that you can't handle, but it's definitely there. And maybe it's because it's just a bunch of high rye, 36% rye in some of this. That really brings out that burn. There's no real sweetness in this to cover it up either. So you're getting a lot of that ethanol kick with this. And at 100 proof, I would say this definitely sips over its proof. Sometimes I say it sips at its proof. Sometimes I say it sips under its proof. I think this does sip over its proof, which isn't my favorite. I like a smoother bourbon when it comes to the drinkability on it, because I don't like to feel that burn. I don't like that Kentucky hug all the time. Now, this is released in September, so this is meant for that winter, fall, autumn time of the year. So obviously, when you get into those high ryes, it's what everybody loves. It's the same reason Midwinter's Night Dram comes out this time of the year. Stag Junior comes out this time of the year, because they want you to drink it in the winter. They want it to have that high rye, that bang behind it, that ethanol to warm you up in front of a fire or something like that. So I understand why it's like that. I just don't love it, especially when I'm sitting inside trying to just drink a glass of bourbon. So for drinkability on this, I don't want to give it too bad of a score because, again, I don't think it's the worst. But at the same time, the first sip definitely gets you. After that, it kind of lightens up a little bit. I'm going to give it like a 7.5 when it comes to drinkability on this. But next, like I mentioned, taste on this is really where this bottle shines. This bottle is is too complex for me. So if you're newer to bourbon, or if you don't have the tasting palate of somebody like Matt from ADHD Whiskey, who's 2020 World Tasting Whiskey Champion, this might be almost too much for you. And it kind of is for me. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like the taste. It's just so much going on in such a small period of time that I can't really appreciate all the flavors that it has to offer because my mind's just all over the place with it. So for me personally, you get the age behind this on the finish, and that's the most noticeable part of this sip for me. The beginning part of the sip is definitely that Kentucky hug. It's definitely that rye spice, allspice, cinnamon, black pepper, all of those flavors coming right at you. There's some type of citrus note in this, whether that's orange or lemon or lime or something, but there's no real sweetness to this, which is really what I enjoy when it comes to a bourbon, right? Like my Wild Turkey Russell's Reserve. You start out sweet, you work into that rye spice, and then you finish off with a little bit of the oak or the tobacco or the leather or whatever you get on the end there. But for this one, it's just really a lot of that spice, a little bit of citrus, and then straight into that oak, tobacco, leather note at the end here. It's not my favorite flavor profile, but it's just so much going on. The mouthfeel is absolutely amazing. You can tell it's an older bottle. You can tell it's blended well because I really don't think that they would put this many different types of bourbon in it at such specific amounts, like 9%, 5%, 19%, 13%, 54%. It's too specific for me to tell that, like, I'm not blending bourbon. So for them to put that blend together for this, I'm sure it's absolutely what they're looking for and they nailed it. It's too much for me. It's too much going on in the glass. Again, I don't hate it. I love the taste of it. I think it's very deep. I think it's very complex. I don't think it's a great starter bourbon if you're new to bourbon, or even if you're not new to bourbon. I've now got 80 plus bottles on my shelf. I have opened every single one of them except 3, and I've had probably another 50 or 60 bottles since then. I'm not a bourbon novice anymore, but at the same time, I'm not over here, like, again, with some of these guys who are drinking it every day and sitting down and writing the notes and taking the notes and nosing their bourbons and getting all these kits. I'm trying to get there. I really am, but I'm not quite there yet. And that's where this one, I think, would shine with somebody who could appreciate what it has to offer and really dive into these notes here. For me, great taste, great flavor profile. I just don't think I can truly appreciate what this bottle has to offer. But I'm going to give it a good score on taste because it deserves one. It's not bad by any means. I'm going to give it like an 8.9 when it comes to taste because I really do believe that this is a great tasting bourbon. I think it's just too complex for me. So 8.9 is where we're going to put it on taste. And as you know, last but certainly not least, we're going to get into a price on this. This MSRP is at $90. Not a bad price at all, if you ask me. My parents were actually traveling to Connecticut. They stopped in New York on the way back. I wish I knew the name of the place because the gentleman that was there was absolutely fantastic to my parents. They have no idea what they're looking for, so they're FaceTiming me. Oh, what do you think? What about this bottle? What about this bottle? And I saw this out of the corner of my eye, and the gentleman actually spoke to me on FaceTime and told me all about the bottle, how it's the newest batch, all of that good stuff. And it was priced right at MSRP. They weren't overcharging for it, which is surprising because from what I hear from most people, New York is usually a little bit more expensive than other places, but they were also in like the sticks of New York. They weren't in New York City or anything. So at $90, that's a fantastic buy for this. You're talking about some of the best, oldest MGP product under Luxco with a mash bill that contains some of the best rye bourbons high rye bourbons that should be available to the market, at least through MGP. And it's got such a, again, significant, in-depth flavor profile. Now, while the drinkability isn't that great, the complexity really makes up for what it's lacking in drinkability. And I think that they keep it that way because they would rather have the flavors than maybe water this down to like a 93 proof and lose a lot of that complexity. So at $90 for a limited release, Luxco, MGP collaboration now that they're joined, I don't think that's a bad ask for this at all. I'm going to give this like an 8.8 when it comes to price on this. I don't think it deserves to be quite in the 9s because of that drinkability, but an 8.8 is a fair spot for this. So let's end it over this week's Bourbon Bomb of the Week and dive into George Remus' story because you got to hear this. Let's do this. So for this week's Bourbon Bomb of the Week, we're going to talk about the crazy life behind George Remus here. He was actually born in Germany and moved to the United States in 1884. At the age of 21, he had already owned a pharmacy and was buying up pharmacies and distilleries around him because he realized how much money he could make off of it. A few years later, at the age of 24, he was done with that and he wanted to become a lawyer, so he started to do that. got the law degree, became a lawyer, and actually took over a case for Cheney Ellis, which we might have heard of is what gave us the insanity plea today. So if you've ever heard of somebody under the insanity plea, that was because George Remus came up with that concept and used it to get Cheney Ellis off the hook. Well, he took this knowledge, he took this industry, and he actually turned it into an empire for himself. With the knowledge of law and the people that he met, the criminals that he met, he took over the bootlegging industry when Prohibition came around. Started selling his liquor under medical, everything under medical, but at one point he realized he can make a lot more money bootlegging, so he had his own people stealing his own product and transporting them under underground tunnels so that he could make money. He actually became, quote unquote, the king of bootlegging. George Remus did this for so long and for so well that he actually threw parties where he was giving away cars because he had so much money. I'm talking this man had $40 million in his first few years doing this. He threw New Year's Eve parties. He invited congressmen over. He basically owned the United States government and part of Kentucky at this point. He had Chicago clubs, speakeasies, everything going on under his own bootlegging, which was all perfectly legal because people were stealing it from him, but it was his people. The man was a genius. But he eventually got caught. And what did he use? Insanity plea, right? He had to get out of it. He used the insanity plea. While he was in prison, this is the M. Night Shyamalan that I was talking about. While he was in prison, his inmate in prison was actually an undercover federal government official. He told the Fed that he actually left all of his money with his wife, right? So none of the money was in his name. It was all with his wife so that they couldn't touch it. This guy, instead of going back to the government with this information, quit his job with the government and went and had an affair with Remus's wife. This guy has murdered people. He's done all types of bad things, I'm sure. And this federal agent was just like, I'm in it for the money. Left prison, quit his job, had an affair with Remus's wife, and they took him for all his money. They gave him $100 of his millions of dollars and said, good luck. They actually tried to get him deported, get out of America, and then they actually tried to have him killed at one point. They paid a hitman $15,000, and what does that hitman do? He went and told Remus that this guy paid to have him killed. He was too scared to do it because of Remus's reputation. So instead of getting killed, Remus, on the way to court, when he was about to divorce his wife, runs his wife off the road, right? And shoots her in the stomach. What? Then pleads insanity to get out of it. This man just used the insanity plea for everything. Pleads insanity, gets out of it, goes into an Ohio insane asylum for 7 months because some other loophole that he found in the legal system, gets out of that, and then becomes basically an informant for another lawyer talking about all the things he did and makes money off that. Then he went on, he lived a life, he had a stroke, and he died at like 75 or something like that. Buried next to his third wife, by the way. And still probably had no money to his name. So this guy was the Great Gatsby and then died alone with his third wife after all of this happened. Crazy story to me. George Remus went from a legend to a jerk back to a legend all in 75 years. So that's the George Remus story. That's who they named this after. And I don't blame them. That's one hell of a story. What do you think? So that's George Remus, and that's what we have here. Remus Repeal Reserve, batch 5, number 5, whatever you want to call this. Distilled by George Remus Distilling Company in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Like we said, Luxco, MGP, all of that good stuff. And this came in at an 8.40, which isn't a bad spot for this at all, considering I can't really appreciate what this bottle has to offer. The drinkability could definitely be a little bit better on this. If it had a little bit more sweet notes at the beginning, I like my bourbons a little bit sweeter. This might be almost too high of a rye when it comes to the mash bill for me, just because I like that 15 to 20% rye. This seems to be closer to that like 25 to 30% rye when you do all the math and break it back down. So not a bad spot at an 8.40, but also not my exact cup of tea. I would actually try and drink this. This could be a daily sipper for me, not because I'm going to get another bottle and continue to drink it, but because I won't really miss it once it's gone. That's just me, myself. I would love to try and save a little bit for next one to compare the two, but we'll see how that goes. But that's where we're going to leave you for today. Make sure you check me out on Instagram at Bourbon of the Week. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m. we drop an image of the bourbon that we're going to review. You can go on and try and guess the score that I'm going to give it. If you guess the closest, I'll give you a shout out on the channel, as well as enter you in a monthly drawing to win some cool prizes, including custom Glens, which we don't have here. We're using our Penelope glass today. But we have custom Glencairns, t-shirts, hoodies, all kinds of stuff. Also, make sure you click that like, make sure you click that subscribe button. We're pushing 1,500 subscribers. And if you want to support me on Patreon, that would be great, but definitely come and support me on Discord. Check out our Discord. We're pushing 100 members. Once we get to 100 members on that, we're going to do a Discord-only giveaway. All of those links are in the description down below. And until then, don't drink and drive, drink responsibly. And as always, stay healthy, stay happy, stay drinking. Cheers, y'all.